everybody, welcome to the first video by Buggs Nest Crochet, where we will go over some of the basic techniques for crocheting. First basic thing most everyone knows is your hooks. They come in an awesome variety of sizes, and these are used to work with different weights of yarn, create amazing projects. So this happens to be my favorite. This is actually a B. It is a 2.25 millimeter hook. It is what I make most of my creations with. I will put a link to my pages where you can see what I make using this hook. This is also a B as well. I actually got these as a birthday present, so I have a tendency to work on multiple projects at one time and hate always having to carry one hook. So I have multiples of a lot of them. These are some of the small, these are actually a little bit bigger. So this one here is an E, and then we also have an F. So an F is a 3.75. If I'm not mistaken, an E is a 3.25. Both of these create a little bit bigger projects than what my B makes, but they're also still very relatively small, very kid-friendly especially. These two are typically what I use when I am working with plush yarn. So a lot of you are familiar with like Bernat plush yarn, like this. It's very thick, so these hooks tend to work the best with it. I have made one of my creations with an F hook using the Bernat yarn. It is not the easiest, but it works. If you are like me, I tend to have problems. You'll notice that I have two larger hooks, and then on both of my super small hooks, they have this really great ergonomic handle. But hooks like this, they don't always work super well for me because I have problems with the size of them in my hand. So to combat that, Susan Bates makes these really awesome grips. You can slide pretty much any hook into it and make it more ergonomic in your hand. The only thing that I find I have a little bit of problems with is the grip sliding from time to time. Not a huge deal. You can just move it and adjust it as you need it. Basics, hooks like that. So I also keep my little tin. So my little tin, for me, it's magnetic, which is amazing. So I keep in it two different types of yarn needles. So I have a darning needle, which has that curved edge, and then I have a yarn needle, so it's super straight. Typically, these are always magnetic. These ones I have found none that are magnetic. These are more of aluminum. These ones are a little bit more, honestly, I don't know what the material is, but these guys are magnetic. These are typically what you would use when you are weaving in ends on blankets, scarves, hats, things like that. You can use a darning needle because of the curved tip. It does tend to get under stitches a little bit better, making it a little easier to weave in ends. I keep a pair of embroidery scissors. Now, you don't have to use embroidery scissors. I have about 3 different pair of scissors that I use. I use embroidery scissors. You can use any type of scissors that you prefer. These are super great when you're doing like little detail work and stuff like that, and you want to clip the yarn super close. Bigger scissors for bigger projects, obviously. I also tend to keep 3 or 4 different stitch markers. Now, stitch markers are super great. If you don't have plastic ones, that is perfectly fine. There are dozens of places you can get them. You can also use safety pins. That is actually what I started with all of my projects, with safety pins. Great things. So when you're working on amigurumi, which are the little animals, you typically work in rounds. It is very easy to lose sight of the first stitch. Stitch markers, you drop it in your first stitch, and that is where you're coming back around to. You can also use stitch markers when you set your projects down. You slide your stitch marker into your working stitch, and you walk away from it. Because the stitch is in it, it doesn't allow it to pull through. That doesn't always work. I tend to be one of those pull up a large loop and pray to God it doesn't move. But to each their own, and everyone finds their own little way. In last couple of weeks or so, I've also found a tension ring. So these are super great. Typically, so I don't hold my yarn in the traditional way. Everyone holds their yarn a little bit differently depending on how they were taught. Typically, before I got my tension ring, I'm gonna bring some yarn out for y'all. When I first started holding, let's change the color, white's not always the best. When I first started crocheting, I obviously didn't have a tension hook, so let me throw a quick slip knot in here. When I would hold my yarn, I would always go 3 fingers around the top, and that was my tension. That was how I held all of my tension. So 3 fingers around the top, and I would hold my tension from there. If you are a little sensitive when it comes to touches and feels, this can be mildly uncomfortable because the yarn is then continuously rubbing, and I have found that since I got my tension ring, I can't necessarily stand that yarn rubbing feeling anymore. It does bother me a little bit. I could probably get over that, but I know some people aren't able to get over that sensitivity, which is perfectly fine, which is why these are so great. So, works like a regular ring. You can wear it like a regular ring and nobody will know the difference, which makes it amazing. So, I don't like how the tension feels when it's on top of my finger, so I actually turn it over. So I have the actual peacock on the underside of my finger. I wrap it around the tail, wrap it around the beak. Now this gives me just enough control over it so that the yarn will slide through, and you can move this up and down your finger as you need to adjust the tension. So for me, this holds just enough tension that as I'm crocheting, it pulls just enough to hold it tight, but not enough to make it too tight. So those are just some of the basics. Now, I did want to also show you guys, if I can get my ring off because my hands seem to be swollen, I was going to go over some of the different patterns and pattern books that you can find. So I have a little bit of an extension, a collection. So one of my favorite books to have is the Stitch Dictionary by Sarah Hazel. So this has 200 essential stitches that every crocheter can use, should know, all of that. It gives you a little bit of a breakdown. It's a really great one. So it goes over the table of contents. So these right here, let me see here. These 2 rows in particular have pretty much your very standard, very basic rows. So your single crochets, your front loops, your back loops, your front and back loops, your half doubles, your doubles, and your trebles. Now these are in US terms, not UK terms. Typically in UK terms, a single crochet is marked as a DC, which in US we see that as double crochet. Double crochets are marked as TCs, which are treble crochets in UK. So the UK versions of these are a little bit different. I will do my best to find a link or picture that shows the differences between the UK and the US terms. So with that, there are 200 different patterns. There are some really great patterns, and I hope to be able to show you guys some of these. Other books that you can get actually have patterns in them. Crochet World is a magazine that I love getting. It has some really great patterns and project ideas. So as you can see, there's different ones. There's also Tunisian crochet, which is a different type of crochet. If you guys are interested, I will do my best to make some videos to get into that as well. But it also has it's a magazine. It has a lot of ads and stuff like that. Some really great mug rugs. These can also be made for like coasters and stuff like that, so they don't just have to be made for mugs. It shows a lot of different techniques and things like that. This is one of my favorites. I love going through these ones. And then for those amigurumi, so they are the Japanese crocheted animals. Everybody loves them, and there are dozens of ones that you can get. So the first 6 books that I'm going to show you guys are actually from kits that I've got, either Costco, you can get them I think at Barnes & Noble, online at Amazon. This is actually the very first book that I started with. My very first animal that I made was actually the Brachiosaurus. If you follow me on Facebook at Buggs Nest Crochet, you'll find out that my mom actually takes my very first one that I made. She calls him Stanley, and he has a helmet, because I did try and make a whale at one point that did not work out. Stanley goes with her when she goes to the hospital. She's had 3 back surgeries now, and Stanley has gone through all 3 of those surgeries with her. So Stanley, the Brachiosaurus, was my very first make. I love this kit. I have not made anything else out of it. Well, that's not true. I did make one more out of it. I have not adventured in, well, I've made two more out of it now that I'm thinking about it. I made these awesome Triceratops guys. I actually have one that I have not yet put together. Hopefully I'll be able to create a video to help show you guys how to put them together. And then I've also made this guy. I can't pronounce the name to save my life. He is super, super cute. I would love to show you guys these because I have dozens of other items. Nightmare Before Christmas. Everybody loves them. Everybody knows them. Jack, Sally, the whole gang. So this has an 11 character set plus a wall hanging for a total of 12. I got this one at Sam's Club. These guys are so great. I love making the Sally. My Sally doll is one of my best sellers. I've only ever made 2 Jacks. 1 Jack. Jack is super fun. These guys provide a super awesome level of difficulty, especially when you get into like the thin legs and everything, because stuffing those can be a little tricky sometimes. The next 2 I have Cuddly Cactus and Crochet Puppies. Both are super, super fun. This author is also the one who did the dinosaurs that I've done out of. I have not yet made anything out of these ones. I cannot wait. So there's 12 different patterns in the succulents, and I want to say there's like 6 or 7 in the Crochet Puppies. So these ones are super, super fun. Now for those other themed ones, we have ones like Harry Potter. I have not yet made anything out of the Harry Potter. I can't wait to though. You have all of your different pieces. Now the really great thing about most pattern books like this is it will give you an abbreviation chart. So this gives you a breakdown of the stitches that are typically used in any of them. We'll go over more about these and everything like that so that everyone will start to learn how to be able to read the patterns using the abbreviations. I can't wait to do these. I love making scarves and hats in the Harry Potter themes. So those are always fun to do. Then we have the one and only Pokemon. These are always a favorite. I've not yet made any, well, I've not made anything out of this pattern. I have made a Bulbasaur before that has gone over fabulously. People have absolutely loved him. But like the rest of them, they do have the breakdown of the types of stitches and things like that. So the first thing that most people need to learn or like to learn is how to read a pattern. So before we get into reading a pattern though, let's learn how to do some basic stitches. I'm going to use green yarn because it tends to show up a little bit better than just about anything else. So with your favorite hook, I use the B, but for this one I'm actually going to jump to the F, so it's a little bit bigger, a little bit easier to see. I'm going to drop my tension ring on just so that I can, the tension ring really helps with creating even stitches and tension. One thing that a lot of people seem to have problems with is getting a gauge. Now, gauges are great, but the one thing to always remember is that no 2 crafters craft the same. I will never crochet the same as somebody else will never crochet the same as me. So because of that, gauges are more of a test rather than an absolute requirement. If you do your gauge swatch and it is bigger than what they said, it just means that your final project is going to be a little bit bigger than what their final project was. Again, this is truly based, in my opinion, on the crafter, because never once have I been able to do a gauge that matches the exact point that they mark in it. So gauges and tension is key, gauges are subjective. That's the best way I can describe it. So the first thing that I'm going to do is we're going to do a chain. So in order to start a chain, you're going to put a slip knot in your yarn. So what I do to make my slip knots is I will pull up. This tail will come behind the working yarn. So the working yarn is what's coming out of the skein. You're going to take your loop, you're going to grab onto that tail, and you're going to pull up. So this creates a loop that is actively able to be closed and enlarged. Okay, so that is our slip knot. There are a million ways to make a slip knot. That's what I was taught to do. That's how I was taught to do it. It makes it the easiest for me. So I'm going to go ahead and set up in my tension ring. So underneath the feather, around the beak, that's the easiest way for me. So when you're doing a chain, it is simply yarning over. So yarning over is when you put your hook behind or around your yarn. Yarn comes over your hook. and you're just going to pull through that first slip knot. So now you have 1 chain. You'll continue this until you get your desired length of chain. So the best thing, so you can see how my stitches are pretty uniform in the most case, for the most part, but see how my tension is starting to get a little out of whack. So you're supposed to have some bounce. I prefer mine to be a little bit tighter than this, so I'm just going to pull my tension a little bit. So this is a chain of 13. Now a lot of people also want to know, how do you count your stitches? So the best way that I can do them is every time you make a stitch, you end up with this little V. So this little V right here, little V. So you count your V's. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Now, that is a small chain. You can make chains as big as you want, as small as you want, anything like that. Most patterns will give you a base chain length plus a certain amount for your foundation chain. For example, in our stitch dictionary, we're going to go to our single crochets, because those are our start. And another really great thing about this book is it gives you a lot of the equipment, so your hooks and stuff, your essential crochet skills. Now remember, these guys are going to show them the way that they are comfortable with. You guys are, everyone is going to find their own way of holding a hook and using the yarn. No two people, typically for me, I find that it depends on how a person was taught as to how they're going to hold their hook and their yarn. There's some people that hold them pencil style, like you guys have seen me. I hold mine in my full hand. I can't do the pencil style. It's not comfortable for me. I've never learned how to do it that way. Shows foundation chains, working in your rows, weaving off your ends, things like that. It also gives you a really great tip as to when you're working on a blanket, turning chains. So I'll get into that in a later video. It also gets into some seams and things like that, other crochet essentials. Gets a little bit into the measuring gauge and the aftercare. I don't always take into a lot of effect those pieces, simply because I've been taught a certain way, and that wasn't the stuff that was typically included in them. So for a single crochet, easiest way, super fun, it's a quick 4-step process. I will show you guys how to do it really quick. So on a single crochet, move this off to the side a minute here. Right. Okay, so for a single crochet, I'm going to go ahead and back it up all the way to our slip knot. Go ahead and insert my hook, and you know what, let me go ahead and go with my bigger hook so it might be a little bit easier to see. So when I change hooks, I do tend to start my slip knot over, because then I'm adjusting it to the size of the hook, just because that is what's always been easier for me. What I always do is I always slide it over this fatter section here, because it creates a little bit looser of one than if I was to go ahead and cinch it down here or even down here. So I tend to start back here and cinch it down from there, because you can always adjust it because it's a slip knot. So go ahead and lace up here, and then I'm going to tighten it just a touch more so it's pretty loose still, but still manageable. So for this one, I'm going to go ahead and chain 11. Now the reason I'm going to chain 11 is because with a single crochet, you always come back one chain from your hook in order to start. 9, 10, 11. So 11 chains. So this swatch, when it's done, should have 10 stitches. So now in the pattern, it tells us to 1 single crochet and 2nd chain from hook. So with that, The loop on your hook is never considered a chain. It is not weaved in, it's not made in, anything like that. So you're going to start in second chain from hook. So here you have your first single crochet, you have your second single crochet. So 1, 2. So you're going to insert your hook into that top chain. So you're going to insert into the top V. You're not going to worry about trying to catch all of the stitches. This is what is called your foundation chain. It's always going to look a little bit different than the pattern that you're working on. So insert in, yarn over, pull through. So you now have 2 loops on your hook. You're going to yarn over again, and you're going to pull them through both loops. That's a single crochet. Now what you're going to do is you're going to continue that all the way across. So insert your hook. I tend to use my fingers, especially on the foundation chain, because I find that it helps me get my hook through the chain a little bit easier than I normally would. So again, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2. Now there's also another way of doing it. I am not super familiar with it. I've never used it. I don't really, the times that I have tried, I don't really like it either. There's also a yarn under method. I don't really like it. I think for me, I see it more commonly when you're holding your hook in the pencil method, to see it being used then. If you're holding it like I'm holding mine, I prefer to do the yarn over. So I'm going to go ahead and continue to the end of the chain, just doing simple single crochets. Now when you're doing the amigurumi, this is typically the stitch that you will use for all of the animals. Now there will be some times where you're using a special stitch, but the cases are super rare, and typically you're using those only as decoration points for certain pieces of it. If you guys follow me on Facebook, you guys have seen my dragon. On his front arms and his back feet, there are what's called a bobble on his hands and his feet to create those toenails. That is the only special stitch in his. Everything else is just single crochets. You guys constantly see me kind of pulling, so this is to get the yarn out of the skein because I haven't pulled enough out. If you find yourself pulling that a lot, just go ahead and grab a little extra. It never hurts to have a little pile of yarn. So now at the end, you should have this little chain. So again, to be able to count your stitches, turn it up like you're looking at the top of it, and you're going to count your same V's that we did on that bottom chain. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. That typically works because you have an 11 foundation chain. You're coming back 2 stitches. So that lasts, when you loop over, that creates that extra stitch for you. Now, when we're going to the next side, we're going to turn it. Well, you can't just turn it like this because then then it kind of gets a little wonky. So before you turn, you're always going to, in a single crochet case, sorry, words are terrible, you're going to chain 1. So you're just going to take your working loop, which is what we call this guy right here, still attached to our active chain. That's our working loop. You're going to chain like you did on your foundation chain. So yarn over, pull through, chain 1, and turn. Turning it is not super complicated, so you're just going to turn it like you do in a page in the book. So you're going to go from right to left, and you're now working on what is considered the back side or wrong side. So right side, you're going to have a little bit more definition and detail. Wrong side, you're going to have a little bit different. It's going to look a little bit smoother in the back, whereas up front, you're going to have a little bit more of that detailed definition. Be careful that you don't do what I just did, which is almost pull out my little chain. So I'm just going to go ahead and pull it out and redo my chain 1 really quick and turn. So now what you're going to do is you're going to go back into this very first spot right here. So this first V square, this V space, that is our first spot. So you're going to insert your hook, yarn over, draw up a loop, yarn over, and come back through those 2. You are now working on row 2. You're going to do that all the way across. So into your little V, yarn over, pull it back out, yarn over, pull through, stitch 2, and just keep doing that all the way across. Now, everyone's speed will vary with crocheting. Newer crocheters, you're going to crochet a little bit slower. That is, don't ever let anyone tell you that you're crocheting wrong, because you don't crochet fast. You don't. I have been crocheting, I've been doing my animals for about a year and a half. Depending on how my hands feel, how much time I have, it can take me anywhere from about 6 hours to 3 weeks to finish an animal. It depends on how I'm feeling and how all of my day around me is going. Crochet at your own speed. Don't ever let anyone dictate how fast you should be crocheting. So crochet is a very, very unique aspect, because crochet is one of the very few fiber arts and yarn arts that cannot be replicated by a machine. Crochet is very much a handmade art. Everyone does it differently, so don't ever let anyone discourage you in, oh, well, you should be doing faster and you should be doing this. Work at your own pace. Don't ever let anyone tell you differently. So now that you're at round 2, the easiest way to count, you can count your rows. So your foundation chain never counts as a row. Never in any of the patterns that I've come across does it ever count as a row. So in that crochet, so you have your first row here, 1, your second row on top of it. You'll notice that it looks a little different from that bottom row, so you'll be able to kind of recognize it a little bit more. Your even rows are going to look like this, your odd rows are going to look like that. So if you turn it to the back, you have your first row and your second row. They look just a little bit different. Sometimes it gets a little hard to count them, especially if you're working on a larger piece. That's where, for me, when I'm working on a large blanket, stitch markers come in handy too, because you can always put them in the end in your chain 1 space to mark X amount of rows. So like for me, I can mark mine at 10s, I can mark mine at 20s, I can even mark them at 5s if I'm doing a smaller piece. That's also an easy way to be able to count how many rows you've done and all of that. So we're back at our end. We're going to go ahead and chain 1 and turn. So what we're working on here, by learning how to crochet in a single stitch or single crochet, we're also creating what is called a swatch. So now what a swatch does is a swatch gives us a base look about what the stitch is going to look like. It also gives us an idea of what our tension is and how it's going to look as a finished project. So one of the big struggles that a lot of people have are these straight edges. Now I too have struggled with straight edges, especially when I'm working on a blanket or that I've never done before. Sometimes trying to find my stitches is a little hard. So if you have to, or you feel that it would be more comfortable for you, what you can always do is take a stitch marker. And so in this case, I'm working on, this is my first stitch or my last stitch in my row. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly chain 1 and I'm going to turn. I'm going to go ahead and put my first single crochet in, and I'm going to pop my stitch marker into this last stitch. Now the reason why is because when I come back around, I know that that's my last stitch, so I've got to have a stitch that goes into this. If I somehow miss this stitch and I'm not moving my stitch marker up again, then it's going to throw my edges off just a touch. It can also happen in a more complicated pattern where you might have miscounted or anything like that. I know I have done this multiple times. So when that happens, you have 2 choices. You can attempt to adjust it as you keep going up, but that's going to lead to a little bit more off-putting edges, or you can do what we call frog it. Now, frog it is kind of a weird term, but I'm going to show you why we call it frog it. So everybody knows the sound that a frog makes, right? That ribbit, ribbit. So everybody, this is going to be really weird. Say to yourself, rip it. rip it. Kind of weird, kind of funny. But now now what's the sound that a frog makes? Ribbit. So when we say that we're going to frog it, we're going to rip it out. Rip it out. Rip it out. Frog it. Just means rip it out. So we can back this all the way up. We can go all the way back down to our foundation chain and all the way out, frogging it. Now, I tend to use a lot of acrylic yarn. This is a 4-weight. This is what you find used a lot. I prefer to use it in my amigurumi. It makes my items just a little bit smaller and a little bit more cost effective for me. Like I said, I have made amigurumi with the Bernat yarn. This is actually one of the projects that I have been working on. This is the head and body to an ogre that I'm working on. I will be getting some more updates on this guy later today. He's part of the hashtag Make It With a Roll series on my Facebook page. I'll show you all that in a little while. So that's a basic single crochet. You can make that chain as long as you want, as short as you want, anything like that. The single crochet is always super great for making blankets, and it can be used in a variety of different ways, patterns, colors, all of that. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Stay tuned for the next one. I will put the link to my Facebook, my Instagram, and my website in the links in the bottom, in the description box. I will also post this over to my Facebook, so if you guys don't, go ahead and pop over there, drop me a follow, and stay tuned for more. Stay crafting, everyone.